What's good? It's Fever. Today I wanted to give a little bit of attention to Enderal. Now looking at it, you may be thinking it looks an awful lot like Skyrim, and you wouldn't be wrong. I guess technically it would be considered a Skyrim mod, but that's not really a fair statement, because this doesn't just change a texture or add a quest or a new enemy type, or really add or modify anything to Skyrim. It's basically a completely new game created with the Skyrim engine. It has its own story, its own narrative, custom-made assets, its own world space. There are unique systems and mechanics that aren't found in Skyrim in Enderal, but because it does use the same engine, there are certain things that will be familiar, like the interface or the menus, the flow of combat, certain game systems like enchanting and alchemy, just to name a little bit, although a lot of what core Skyrim has in it that is incorporated into Enderal have been upgraded or tweaked specifically for it or altered with tons of mods that were rolled into the base install. Now this all helps to optimize the performance, to minimize crashing as much as you can in a Bethesda game, giving you a more stable game, but most importantly to make the game look and feel better to play. Enderal looks much better than vanilla Skyrim. Unfortunately, this means that these changes will end up increasing the computer requirements needed to play Enderal over Skyrim. And also, for so many modifications, Enderal scores some points for being super easy to install, as it has its own launcher that backs up your current Skyrim files and auto-installs and updates itself. So clearly, the scope of this mod already sounds pretty big, but it's actually massive. I myself took 50 hours to complete it, and I skipped a lot, and the creators, the German Sure AI team, have gone on to say that there is potentially 100 hours of content here if you do all the side stuff, which is pretty crazy and has been confirmed by people talking about their experiences with the mod. Enderal as a game is the sequel to a similar mod made for Oblivion called Skyrim, and Skyrim actually is one of my top 10 favorite RPGs, and after finishing this game, so is Enderal. It's hard to talk a lot about the game without giving much of it up. Even the video clips I chose, I was trying to be very careful because there is so much to uncover and find and learn and just be impressed by that I didn't want to spoil it. So I'm being purposely vague, but I did want to talk about things that I think might interest people. Like, for one, the game uses traditional experience points and levels. So you kill a monster, you get experience, and if you get enough, you gain a level. And when you gain that level, you are given different types of attribute points that you can spend to customize your character in different ways with accompanying systems that I'm not going to talk about. There are also rough classes that alter things up quite a bit that are defined by how you spend those attribute points, and also secret classes that you can learn about through different mechanisms in the game, reading a book, listening to dialogue, etc., that allow you to work towards those secrets. And just, there are secret classes, but there are secrets that permeate throughout the game that rewards you for paying attention to the small stuff. Now the classes go hand in hand with new skills, rebalanced combat, original enemies with unique fighting mechanics, and that leads to a balance level that is a bit harder than Skyrim, but unfortunately can become trivial if you min-max correctly or go stealthy archer, as one of the worst parts of the game is the enemy AI at range mixed with sneaking, and it's a problem that plagues Skyrim as well. I also need to make a note here that there is a mage type of playstyle that's kind of like a blood mage where they use their life force to attack, and that doesn't add that much, but it is my favorite playstyle and I just love it and have to note it when it exists in a game. A lot of mechanics in Enderal are just flat out less forgiving. There's no fast travel. You can't wait unless you are at a bed or like at an inn. There is less health regeneration across the board. Potions have drawbacks. There's no level scaling. There's also this weird arcane fever that works kind of like radiation and Fallout, where it limits certain types of magic uses or item uses, and it can make certain areas deadly because the areas themselves will give you this arcane fever, and then it's just something else that you have to manage. And you're just going to notice across the board that there are changes and tweaks that make the game harsher than Skyrim. You might also be interested in Enderal making crafting more difficult but rewarding because it will create more powerful equipment than what you can find, but also the inclusion of items that you can find that are set items with set bonuses, which is always a fan favorite. But story and lore is where this game shines. First, the voice acting and dialogue is incredible. It's on par with AAA games most of the time, and I'd say only about 10% of the time is it lackluster, and this is usually one of the weaker parts of mods, and to make a statement saying that 90% of it is on par with AAA games is impressive, but it's even more impressive that the English version is a localization of the German release, and aside from, some mistranslated text or the odd German audio line or some weird phrasing, you don't get the mod vibe, which those who sample a lot of user-created stuff will know very well. It feels professionally done. It is a bit dialogue heavy, a lot of which you can avoid with chat selections, but it does lend itself to fleshing out the cast of characters in a much more in-depth way. There is a smaller cast of characters, but very few of them are just warm bodies. They all have a story to tell, or a story that will be told. The pacing of the game is quite linear. Enderal is kind of a slow burn where things build up on one another and come together much like a book. It uses an open world, but the flow of the game just allows them to be able to create these stretches of suspense and creepy moments and draw out emotion in a way that an open world RPG usually can't do. Open world RPGs are kind of like collections of short stories that are kind of tied by a theme, where they're kind of like piecemeal stories where you only do them when you want to because you're being pulled in 30 different ways, whereas Enderal is quite linear. And I do need to make that statement because it has that open world, but it doesn't feel like an open world game. There are a lot of memorable moments, as well as powerful moments, one of which is the opening scene. You turn on the game, and within 5 minutes, it clearly will show you that you are not in Skyrim anymore, and I'm trying to stay ambiguous here. But the game's story is a bit unconventional and has some themes and undertones that are very, I don't want to say deep, but adult. And this is probably why this game in Skyrim ranks so high for me, because the game treats you as an adult. It doesn't beat you over the head with its story or what it's trying to parallel. It has this level of nuance, and while the actual story points may be hit or miss depending on who's playing it, it is refreshing for a game not to treat you like a retard in its storytelling. The game world itself will bring you through many different tile sets, desert to forest to snowy mountains to large cities, and because the game is more linear and the area is smaller, there is an understanding of the places you'll head and what path you'll take to get there, and so you're met with these vistas that the game has designed to make you see, and you're met with environmental storytelling, and off the beaten path, there are secrets and hidden stuff waiting for you, but it really does enforce this quality over quantity, this handcrafted experience. Like, you won't see repeated dungeon layouts or house templates. Everything feels original. And this might all seem like gushing, and honestly it is. High-quality RPGs are rare, especially nowadays, and especially if you don't want to play the dated-looking CRPGs. The game feels like a mesh between Skyrim and Gothic, which is a criminally underrated RPG series, but because of the overlap with Skyrim through just using the same engine, it's familiar enough for people just wanting to experience that fresh state of Skyrim. It kind of takes you back to when you didn't know the quest lines by heart, or what everything did or does, and so even if extensive character development or philosophical storytelling isn't for you, it's fun to just not know shit again. And if you have Skyrim, this is a free download and I would highly recommend it. If you don't and you like RPGs, I highly recommend that you get Skyrim to try this out. Overall, for a rating, I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10, which might sound low, but when good RPGs are so rare, we need to identify them and jump on them when we can. And sure, I would love if you started your own studio and you weren't piggybacking off of the engine, because you certainly have the chops. Until next time, this is Fever. Peace.